Crawford's got to hurry. Oh, no. Jesperson, half-court lead for the win. Jesperson knows it. Jameson through for the win. Gone. He did it. Bryce Drew did it. Jenkins for the championship. There's the pass to Leitner. Puts it up. Yes! The time, 18. Shot, Jordan. Michael Jordan, 14 seconds. Brown. Look outside. This is the point where he always hits it. Oh! Aaron Harrison, beyond belief.
All right, what is going on, everybody? Parker Fields here, and we are here with another episode of At Large Bid. This is our second episode doing this together. And before we get into this video or this podcast for you guys, do us a favor. Like this video on YouTube, subscribe down below, follow us on all our socials. It is linked down below in the description of the link tree. And give us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anything you listen to your podcasts on. We're literally on everything. And without further ado, let's get right into it. So I'm Parker Fields here with my co-host, Neil Meyer. Neil, how are you doing today?
Good. How are you, man?
Can't complain. I'm ready to talk a little bit about a crazy week in college hoops that we had.
Yeah, it was a real crazy week. So I'm getting real excited heading down the final stretch. So let's break it down.
Yeah, exactly. There's a big time change at the top of the AP polls today as Alabama is now the number one team in the country as Purdue falls to Northwestern this weekend. And a bad loss for Purdue. I mean, Northwestern's not a bad team by any means, but it's still not even close. You got a borderline tournament team versus the number one team in the country. It's a bad loss for sure.
Yeah, most definitely. That was definitely a bad loss, plagued by second half turnovers. I think Northwestern did a great job at really containing Zach Edey there in the second half, but overall, that second half turnovers is what killed Purdue in yesterday's loss to Northwestern, 64-56. So overall, I mean, Purdue falls to number 3 in the latest AP polls. Alabama's back on top.
Yeah, we'll get into that Purdue game in a little bit in the show, but a couple more just drastic changes that happened. Arizona lost. They dropped 4 spots to number 8. Tennessee lost once again, drops all the way down to 10, 4 spots. Xavier drops 3 spots after another loss. And Iowa State drops 8 spots. 8 spots from Iowa State. So that's a big drop after 2 losses last week, Texas Tech and Missouri. So bad week for Iowa State fans. Yeah, what else stands out to you from the polls today?
Yeah, TCU slips down 5 spots as well. They're now coming in at 22 after being, I believe, as high as number 11 this season. They're really missing Mike Miles there. Eddie Lumpkin's still battling a little ankle injury. So, I mean, TCU's starting to slide down, but Baylor's right back up 5 spots. They're sitting at now number 9 in the latest AP polls. But overall, TCU is what's really starting to take a little fall back there. They're really missing Mike Miles. Obviously, Mike Miles is one of the best point guards in all of college basketball. However, they're still battling that injury. They just had a hard-fought loss to Baylor. It was only a 4-point game, and that loss is what kind of hurt them because Baylor was number 14 at the time. TCU was, I believe, 11 or 12, and now they're falling. So they might have came in at 13, but they're falling pretty low in the latest AP polls.
Yeah, I agree with you there, Neil. Something that stands out to me real quick is Tennessee. They've definitely been struggling as of late, and they got a big week up ahead as they got Kentucky on Saturday, and then coming up before Kentucky, what's it called? Sorry. They got Bama. So tough week for Tennessee as Kentucky obviously has been struggling, but that team we know is talented. They've beat Tennessee already this year in Tennessee. And that team obviously is going to be hungry and motivated because they can't really afford many losses anymore. So that's going to be a tough game in Rupp Arena. And Tennessee's got to play the number 1 team in the country this week. So it's going to be a tough week for them for sure. At least they get Bama at home, but Tennessee's going to have to prove themselves this week.
Yeah, most definitely. And they'll have to put up more than 46 points than what they did on Auburn versus a team like Bama and versus a team like Kentucky. They're going to have to find ways to put up points, but you lose 2 straight games on buzzer beaters. I mean, Missouri chucks one up, and then you lose to Vanderbilt on a buzzer beater as well. That Tennessee team should have blown Vanderbilt right out of the water, but overall the buzzer beater came through, and they just didn't play their game. Me personally, I thought Tennessee hasn't looked like a top 5 team in the last 3 or 4 weeks, but they now fall to number 10. So they have 2 big opportunities this week with Alabama and Kentucky. So we'll be curious to see how Tennessee bounces back this week.
Yeah, I'm definitely curious as well. And the SEC hasn't been the best conference this year. It's been all right. But it's real top heavy, I'd say, this year. So we got to see what Tennessee can do. And they got probably 2 of their toughest teams they're going to play in the SEC. So yeah, we'll see. It'll be a tough matchup for them for sure. Gonzaga's up 3 spots. Indiana, Miami, all up 3 to 4 spots. And Creighton's up 5 spots. That just shows like these teams were taking advantage of all these teams sliding, and they're moving up the rankings pretty easily. A team like Creighton, they went on that 6 or 7 game losing streak in the middle of the year, and now they find themselves at 17-8, ranked in the top 20 in the entire country. And it just shows you how if you get hot at the right time, it really can affect your rankings, because we're going to talk about it in a little bit. The struggling Duke, UNC, Kentucky teams all got 8 and 9 losses, and those teams aren't even close to being ranked. And then you got a Creighton team that's been winning recently but started off horrible, and they're right in the top 20.
Yeah, and Creighton, a team you mentioned, I mean, it's a good thing that you did mention them. They started the season in the top 25. I believe it was top 15 because
they were in the top 10 during Maui.
Yeah, when they were in Maui, they were ranked fairly high, and then they had, as you mentioned, the lull of 6 straight losses. So they slipped not just only out of the top 25, but they found themselves probably looking on the outer side of 35-40. And then you get hot at the right time, like you mentioned, and now they're fighting their way back into now sitting at 18 with a big stretch here in conference play to come back. And the Big East it's a gauntlet of a basketball conference. It's right there behind the Big 12, I would believe, Big 12 and Big 10. But the Big East has some powerhouses, and you can see that clearly by the latest AP poll rankings.
For sure, man. And I mean, it's definitely going to be a battle in the Big East. You got a lot of competitive teams. A lot of teams with similar records in Big East play. So it's definitely going to be a battle to see who's going to come out on top in that conference and who's going to finish towards the top of those rankings. I did want to talk a little bit about some of the blue blood schools that have been struggling as of late. You got Duke, North Carolina, Kentucky, probably the 3 biggest fan bases and the 3 biggest blue blood schools. Kansas is in there too, but I'd say Duke, North Carolina, and Kentucky are a little bit bigger than Kansas, just a little bit. And all 3 of these teams have been struggling recently. All teams lost at least 1 game last week. Kentucky lost 2. Duke lost 2 as well, correct? And then North Carolina lost 1. But North Carolina's lost like 4 out of the last 5 or 4 out of their last 6, something like that. They've really been struggling. So what are your thoughts on those teams? And do you think these teams can make it into the field of 68?
Yeah, so getting back into it, Duke's coming off, as you mentioned, 2 straight losses. I mean, they got blown out by 22 versus Miami, a very good Miami team. And then they come back on the road, give a hard-fought game versus number 8 Virginia, and they lose 69-62. But overall, Duke's got a great chance ahead of them to make it in the tournament, but they're going to have to they can't have any more bad losses. I mean, they have Notre Dame coming up, Syracuse. They're going to have to blow Louisville out of the water like most teams have this season. But if they're going to want any shot of making that tournament as a decent seed, they're going to have to win out. Probably they're going to have to really control the tempo versus NC State on the 28th and play North Carolina very well in the last game and make that nice little run in the AAC tournament. And then North Carolina, as you mentioned, that's another one of those blue blood teams. I mean, you just never know what could happen with North Carolina. I mean, you just never know. And
it's pretty much exact team minus Brady Manick made the national championship last year, and I mean was close to winning it. I thought they were gonna win it, honestly.
Yeah.
before the game and everything. I picked them to win it, and it's just crazy. Like they just might not be a regular season team. I don't know, because they were bad in the regular season last year. They were like an 8 seed.
Yeah, but now that you mentioned it, North Carolina's coming off a 91-71 victory over Clemson. This was a Clemson team that was in the top 25 just over 2 weeks ago. And then they have a huge opportunity tonight at home versus Miami. And then they go right back at home on Sunday versus NC State, another top 25 opponent. And then they finish out this season with Virginia, Florida State, and Duke. So they will have 4 big opportunities in the last 6 games to really get that resume built up a little bit higher, boost it for the conference the conference tournament and March Madness. But you're looking back at their schedule. I mean, they lost to Virginia earlier in the season. They had the good win over Michigan. They squeaked by Ohio State in overtime. I mean, North Carolina, like they lost to Indiana. However, they did go to 4 overtimes in the PK Classic, PK 85 with Alabama, 103-101. So, I mean, you're looking back on that game, that's probably going to be their best game of the season is versus Alabama, and that was the 3rd game of the season. However, they have lost to Iowa State, a top 25 team, lost to Bama, lost to Indiana. So they have good quality losses on their record, but they don't have that big quality win yet, in my opinion, outside of Clemson. And they could have the opportunity here to get 2 top 25 wins in the next week.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you there, Neil. And yeah, they definitely have some big opportunities. And then let's talk a little bit about the Kentucky Wildcats now, the other team that we haven't quite mentioned yet. Kentucky has really been struggling after a loss to Georgia in their most recent matchup. And who did they lose to at the beginning of the week? Mississippi State, I want to say.
I think it was Mississippi State.
Yeah, so lost to Georgia and Mississippi State this last week. I mean, really struggling, losing games at home in Rupp Arena, which, I mean, they're not really used to losing in Rupp. And it's really been a tough year for them overall. Shibwe has not been the same player as he was last year. He's still definitely an All-American caliber player, but he hasn't been the same level of effectiveness that he was last year. I mean, they don't have a lot of scoring and shooting. Like Antonio Reeves is really the only guy that can just say, hey, go get a bucket on the perimeter, really. Cason Wallace is a really nice player, and he's going to be a really good player in the NBA, I believe, but that's just not his game. He's sort of like a Swiss Army knife like type player, all-around great player. He's not really just a scorer. And, yeah, that's really what they're missing. They don't have that guy, late shot clock situations, go get me a bucket, go shoot a 19-foot step back or something. Like, they really just don't have that guy right now.
Yeah, you obviously mentioned Tshiebwe. I feel like he's not the same player from a year ago on the offensive side. The defensive side, he's still making the plays. He's still grabbing boards, but they're going to need to get some offensive production from him here down the final stretch. And actually, correction, they lost to Arkansas, then Georgia last week.
Arkansas. I was thinking it was Mississippi State.
Yeah, and they have Mississippi State on Wednesday. But you're looking down, you lose by 15 to Arkansas. That was an Arkansas team that was the top 25 team early on. They're battling injuries. Obviously, Nick Smith Jr., one of the highly touted prospects in all of college basketball, has missed a lot of time due to injury. But, I mean, they have a 5-point win over Florida. They lost to Kansas by 9 early in the season. They have the big win versus Tennessee there. They lost to Alabama by double digits. But overall, in conference play, like if Kentucky's going to want to have any shot to make their statement here in conference play, I mean, they're going to have to – it's going to start with this one here versus Mississippi State. They can bounce back, go on the road, get a big win. But then they come home on Saturday, as we mentioned, host Tennessee. If they can play like they did in the first matchup versus Tennessee and really establish their game early and put some points on the board, really limit Tennessee's offense, if they can put some points on the board, get a big night out of Oscar Tshiebwe, whether it's just a 14-12, a 14-13 night, if you can get double digits points out of Oscar Tshiebwe and get him to grab 13, 14 boards, I think you're in great hands coming down the conference tournament, especially with those kind of numbers on Saturday versus a good Tennessee team who has struggled as of late.
Yeah, he's definitely going to need a big game, and he's going to have to carry this team if they want to make any type of run this season and still want to do something with this season. They're definitely going to need a run from a really good stretch here from Tshiebwe late. And then Duke, what are your thoughts on this team and what they've been doing?
Yeah, so that Duke team, they had the opportunity the other night to really put that one away versus Miami or versus Virginia. It was in Virginia in overtime. I thought that call late, I thought it wasn't the right call. I mean, I believe it was a foul call late. Obviously, heading into OT, I thought Flipkowski should have been going to the line to knock some free throws down to win that game, but angles and camera wise, ref said otherwise. So overall, they saw a good opportunity slip out of their hands. But I think if they put it all together here in the latest stretch, I mean, the next 4 games for them aren't really going to do much for them in terms of boosting their NCAA terms and resume, because they have Notre Dame, Syracuse, a really bad Louisville team, and then Virginia Tech.
Imagine that Louisville team wins the ACC tournament. That would be so funny.
That would be wild.
That would be insane. I think I might have to be tuned into all those games just in case somehow they won it. That would be insane.
Go 3-22 on the season and run off a conference tournament. I mean, it is conference play. You never know, but
that'd be awesome.
Yeah, it would be awesome. But overall, I mean,
Kentucky fan, that'd be awesome.
But overall, if they can win 4 straight heading into NC State, North Carolina, and they can get 1 or 2 of those, I mean, if they get both of those, I think that solidifies them as an NCAA tournament team. But heading on, you can't have any of these games where you drop them off. And I'm looking at their schedule now. 4 of their last 6 are at home. So obviously their schedule's playing to their advantage. They have 4-6 games at home. They go on the road versus North Carolina, I believe. Yeah, they play at Chapel Hill versus North Carolina. But if you can get a big win versus NC State at home heading into North Carolina, I think that Duke team's in great hands heading into the conference tournament.
Yeah, agreed with you. They definitely need a big win against North Carolina. But North Carolina needs that game just as much as Duke does, seriously. So that's a big game for both of those teams for maybe potential seeding, for even if they're going to get in the damn tournament, honestly. So, those Blue Bloods are struggling. We'll see how everything turns out with them. But now I mentioned that we talk a little bit about it earlier in the stream. Let's talk a little bit about Purdue, their loss over the weekend to the Northwestern. Northwestern does have a scrappy team. They play really solid defense. They play well overall, like together. What are your thoughts on this Northwestern team and that upset W they pulled off?
Yeah, I mean, this is a Northwestern team that's going to be able to make some runs. They now have the big win over Purdue. I believe they beat Indiana earlier in the season.
They did, I think. I'm pretty sure.
As well. So if you have that big win against Indiana as well, I mean, looking down at it, they have the team to depth. I mean, they're currently sitting right now.
I love Chase Adish. I love his game.
Yeah. They're sitting right now at 27.
I'm not going to sit here. Here, go ahead. Sorry.
They're receiving votes at 27. They have a big win versus Michigan State earlier in the season. Then looking down, they have the 84-83 victory over Indiana, so they beat them by 1. So that's their good win. And then you also have they got blown out by Iowa, blown out by Michigan. I mean, that Purdue is probably their best win. I think this Northwestern team can really make another statement here this week. They could build off of that momentum when they take on Indiana on Wednesday at home. So, I don't know. I think this Northwestern team could definitely make a run. Like I said, they're now sitting 27th, receiving votes right behind Missouri and Florida Atlantic for the top 25. So, I don't know. I like this Northwestern team. As you mentioned, they're a scrappy team, but overall, they played tremendous defense yesterday on Purdue. I mean, Purdue had I think it was 12 second half turnovers, and they came down and hit that big time shot right there in the corner to tie that one up with about 80 seconds left, and then it was all Northwestern from there. So they hit the shots at the right time. They capitalized off the mistakes and took advantage of it.
Yeah, I'm not going to sit here and act like, I watch every Northwestern game or anything by any means, but the 2 or 3 times I've watched them this year, Chase Adish, he's really impressed me. Like, his defensive prowess is really impressive. Like, the guy is literally averaging 2.5 steals a game this season. He's a great defender. He was really active getting in passing lanes. And on the offensive end, he's not the most efficient scorer, shoots only 38% from the field, 33% from 3. However, it's just not really their play style. They want to win low 60s. They want to win an ugly, hard fought battle like to the end and everything. So like, it's not really their play style, but he's just really impressed me overall with his skill and his talent so far this season.
Yeah, most
Especially
definitely.
on the defensive end.
Yeah, no, I agree. But now we can kind of turn the focus to this week. Obviously, now that the polls are out, what are some games you are looking forward to this week, Parker? Obviously, there's a lot of good matchups on deck. So curious to see what matchups you're looking out for this week.
I want to see how Duke and Kentucky both respond to 2-game losing streaks. They both got big weeks ahead of them. Both got big teams they got to play. So I want to see how both of those teams respond to those top 25 teams, or to those 2 losses in a row. I was about to say to those top 25 losses. To those 2 losses in a row from both of them. I'm really looking forward to tonight, Miami versus UNC. That should be a good test for UNC, and I'm excited to see that game go down. And I want to see how Purdue bounces back this week. See how they do, not having their number 1 ranking that they've had for a little bit. They've probably gotten a little comfortable with that number 1 ranking. And let's see how they perform now that they don't have it anymore.
Yeah, no, you mentioned Duke. For Duke, for me personally, I would like to see a little more production out of Derek Lively. Obviously, he was the number 1 prospect coming into this year. He's kind of not lived up to the hype on the offensive end. He's been great defensively. But if Duke can get him to put up some more offensive numbers, I feel like if they can get him to put up a double-double every game here on out, like he's capable of, he's very capable of it.
That's a high request, though, for somebody averaging 4 and 4.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Being the number 1 prospect, if they can get him to turn it around a little bit more, I would like to. Me personally, I was high on him coming out, but I just think he's really kind of struggled with the adaptation to college basketball, obviously being a high school phenom. But overall, if they can get something going for Derek Lively later and boost those numbers, or he can just pop off 1 or 2 games, I think that'll really boost the momentum for this Duke team.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Lively's definitely been a disappointment. Like, I was supposed to be a top 5 draft pick coming into the year and everything like that, and that sure as hell ain't happening unless he had some sort of insane turnaround. But yeah, Duke's just overall been disappointing, kind of their freshman class as a whole compared to like what it could have been. You know what I mean? But Flipkowski, he's had signs, he's had flashes where it looked really good. But yeah, Lively's just been a real struggle this whole season, kind of finding his footing. And I feel like he's not adjusted to the physicality of the college game, honestly.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. But now let's talk about some other big matchups here. Let's flash forward to Wednesday night. You have Providence versus Creighton. So I'd like to get your thoughts on that top 25 battle. Obviously, they're both close in the rankings. Big East battle has been known to throw some good games out this year, so some hard-fought battles. So what's your early thoughts on Providence and Creighton?
Well, first off, the Big East is probably the most competitive conference, I'd say, this year. It's the deepest conference, I'd say, at least. Like, there's not really one team pulling away from the others. Like, each time, like, you think Xavier's that team, Xavier loses or something. Like, UConn early was the number 1 ranked team in the country, and that lasted for about 20 seconds. But yeah, it's just the conference as a whole. Nobody's really pulling away. So this is a big matchup between 2 of the top teams in the conference. Creighton's obviously led by Nimhard. I never can pronounce their big guy's name. Kalbrenner. How do you pronounce his last name?
Kalbrenner.
Kalbrenner. I said Kalbrenner. He's obviously a monster inside. And they when they get in that pick and roll game between those two, it's really scary. And that's where Xavier, when I watched that game, Xavier had a really hard time stopping those two in their pick and roll and everything like that. So if Providence can limit that, that would be a big key for them. And then Providence on their end, they got Bryce Hopkins. I mean, come on the scene this year, averaging 17 and almost averaging a double-double. Dude is a monster. I mean, dude plays with so much energy all the time. And Coach Cal's regretting not giving him minutes. But
yeah, and as we're talking about Big East, the game I'm most looking forward to is how does Xavier respond after their 69-67 loss to Butler on Friday night. They take on Marquette this Wednesday. Overall, it was just a devastating loss to Butler on the road on Friday night. I mean, Sully Boom we see him go down. He twists his ankle late in I believe it was like halfway through the first half. Honestly, I have to give him a shout out. I don't know how he returned to that game after seeing him twist that ankle. It's definitely looked like an easy sprained ankle. I mean, he was running full force, and it was a nasty sprain. And to bounce back like he did, to even come back and fight to get back in that game, showed the heart and the player that Sully Boom is. But Marquette's on a roll right now. And I mean, yeah, they had that one early loss last week, but they bounced back in the win column over the weekend. However, Xavier's still without Zach Freemantle. This is a whole different team with Zach Freemantle out. I think Jack Nungy's a phenomenal player, don't get me wrong, but he kind of cost them the one versus Butler. I mean, they got the turnover there in the last few seconds, and then it was a loose ball, and he, being a fifth year, right? He's a graduate, right? So he's a fifth year.
Yeah.
And then he calls a timeout that they don't have. But you as a fifth year player, you got to know you don't have a timeout in that situation. You can't call that. You as the veteran guy on the court should know, hey, we don't have any timeouts. We got to get up and go. Try to get this run out. Try to get a last shot before even sending it to overtime. Like, you had the opportunity, but you call the timeout, puts Butler on the line to shoot 2 free throws, which makes it a 69-67 game. And then on top of that, that's what you lose off of was those 2 free throws. And overall, I mean, it was just a bad loss. Obviously, Sully Boom goes down with what looked to be a sprained ankle. He comes back in, doesn't have the night he typically does. I mean, Sully Boom is up for Player of the Year in the Big East, and we have seen that all season. But I'm very curious to see how they bounce back versus Marquette.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And it just feels like every time Xavier, like, we're ready to give them like a real top tier team label, it's almost like they disappoint as soon as they get right to that edge.
Yeah, no, most definitely. And I thought we had that. I mean, the Xavier Marquette game earlier in the season was one for the books. However, Marquette
Tyler Kolek dominated that first half.
And this
looked like Kobe.
This is one that people don't remember. This Marquette team was picked to finish last in the Big East. Absolute last. Now they're a top 10 team, and they're proving why they are one of the top teams. I mean, like you mentioned, Tyler Kolek's an absolute dog. He's out here putting up absurd numbers. He's a great playmaker, can create for others. However, Xavier did get the best of them, 80-64 or 80-76 in the first matchup. Tyler Kolek finished with 25 points. I do remember correctly, Parker, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't 21 of those come in the first half?
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Yeah, he dominated that first half. He had 20 or 21.
And
I don't remember if it was 20 or 21.
The last time these two teams matched up, Zach Freemantle finished with 10 and 8, so almost a double-double. Xavier saw 6 players in double figures, led by Sully Boom and Jack Nungy, who each had 16 points. Sully Boom didn't have his best shooting night. First Marquette, the first go-around, he just shot 5 of 15 from the field. However, the bigs dominated for Xavier in that game. Nungy and Freemantle both went 5 or 9 from the field with double digits. However, Marquette, this is going to be a different gamer this time around now that Zach Fremantle's out.
Yeah, 100% there, Neil. Literally 100%. Everything you said is right. And Xavier just like, they're really close to me saying they're like a top team. Really close. But every time they get to that edge, it's some sort of backtrack to not put them there anymore. That's we had a good talk today about teams and everything. Do you want to get into our players of the week?
Yeah, no, most definitely. Let's do it.
All right, go ahead. Give it to them.
So my player of the week is going to be Kevin McCullough for Kansas. Obviously, McCullough transferred in this year. However, he hasn't put up those big offensive numbers throughout the season. But this week, he came out when the team needed him the most. First, Kansas State. Obviously, Kansas State got the first one between these two teams. It's not a huge stat sheet that jumps off the table. However, he did finish with 16 and 13, a double-double in Kansas's 90-78 victory over Kansas State. However, I just feel like that was one of his most dominant performances. I mean, that's the kind of night Bill Self was looking to get day in and day out when they brought him in. I don't think they were really expecting him to grab 13 rebounds each game, but they can get him anywhere to 7 to 9 boards a night. That's phenomenal for Bill Self. So if you look down and you see a 16 and 13 night from Kevin McCullough, you can't be anywhere near disappointed with the night he had.
No, 16 and 13. I think he'll take that every night.
Yeah, take it every night, especially over a good Kansas State team. I mean, Keontae Johnson, everyone knows his story. It's a phenomenal story. The comeback is real. Like the comeback story, just everything he went through. He battled a bunch of adversity. He's really changed the program of Kansas State. Jerome Tang's done a great job out there. And overall, that Kansas State team's tough. So to come back, put up a dominant performance, and get back in the win column to solidify their ranking now. Kansas is up to number 5 in the AP polls this week. That's a huge win for Bill Self in Kansas.
Yeah. You said it exactly right. That's a huge win. And McCullough's been playing great as of late. And yeah, he definitely deserves that title from you. I'm going to swing it over to a TCU player. I'm going to go Boo Buie, who I didn't mention earlier. 26 points on the number 1 team in the country at the time as they got the huge upset win over Purdue, and then 19 points in a win over Ohio State. Dude was all over the floor against Purdue with 3 steals and 3 blocks, getting it done on both ends of the floor. And he's overall just having a great season, averaging 16.5 points, 3 rebounds, over 4 assists. Not the most efficient scoring the ball, 40% from the field, but I talked about this earlier with Chase Adige as well. They just kind of play ugly, whereas like they're not going to get the best looks all the time. So a lot of these shots are late shot clock shots, not the best looks like in the flow of the offense and everything. So I don't attest the shooting percentage completely on him, but he's been having a great year, and he's probably had his best year or week of the season with these 2 huge games and 2 huge wins. Even though Ohio State's bad, a win's a win. A win is always huge. And technically, I mean, Sunday they played Wisconsin too, so kind of 3 games in a week, and I mean, played well in another win versus Wisconsin there.
Yeah, you mentioned it. That Ohio State team, we can hit on it a little bit. 6 straight losses. We're ranked in the top 25 at one point. It just seems like everything's just not clicking for Chris Holtmann and the Buckeyes down there in Columbus. Obviously, they're highlighted by freshman standout Bryce Sensabaugh, but it just seems like Bryce Sensabaugh and Sean McNeil are the only 2 options they got there on the offensive end.
Yeah, agreed. They've really been struggling, and it's a rough season down in Columbus, or up in Columbus for me. Rough season for me, up in Columbus, or not for me, for Ohio State.
Yeah, no, most definitely. And one of the teams that were favorited high in the Big Ten, and I mean, you lose 6 straight. It's going to be hard to bounce back for that at all.
Mm-hmm, exactly. Neil, do you got anything else you want to touch on before we get out of here?
No, unless you got anything else.
I don't really got anything else. Hopefully it's an exciting week of college basketball. That was all for us. We are going to move this podcast to have it a couple times a week, starting in a few weeks, like right when conference tournament play is getting started. We're going to move this podcast to be 2 times a week. I hope you guys all enjoyed this podcast. If you did, subscribe on YouTube down below. Click the link in the description. Get on the link tree. Follow 48 Minutes Network on every social media platform. And yeah, guys, review the podcast on every podcast platform. And we'll see you guys all next week.